The sun hung low over the Arizona Territory that autumn afternoon, and Samuel Hart had been riding for 3 days straight through dust and memory. His ranch sprawled across the valley floor ahead, and from this distance it looked just as he'd left it 6 months prior when duty called him away to help his brother settle affairs back. East Samuel was 58 years old, and his face carried the lines of a man who'd known both triumph and sorrow. The brim of his hat shaded eyes that had seen too much violence in his younger years as a lawman before he'd traded his badge for cattle and solitude. These days he preferred the company of horses to people and the quiet of open land to the noise of town life. As he guided his mare down the slope toward home, he noticed something unusual near the old cottonwood that marked the eastern boundary of his property. At first he thought it might be an animal caught in something, but as he drew closer, his chest tightened with recognition. A person hung upside down from the thick branch, and even from a distance he could see the unnatural stillness that spoke of suffering. Samuel urged his horse forward, and his heart began to hammer against his ribs. He'd seen this before in his darker days, and the memories flooded back unwelcome and bitter. Territorial disputes and vengeance played out in cruel displays, meant to send messages to anyone passing by. But this was his land, and he'd left all that violence behind, or so he'd believed. The figure was small and wrapped in what appeared to be torn clothing, and as Samuel approached he could make out long dark hair hanging down toward the ground. A woman, he realized, and his stomach turned. Above her head hung a wooden sign painted with words that made his jaw clench. "The white man never forgets." Samuel dismounted quickly and pulled his knife from his belt. His hands were steady despite the rage building in his chest. This wasn't justice, and it never had been. This was hate and cruelty dressed up in righteousness, and he wanted no part of it on his land or anywhere else. "I'm going to cut you down," he called up gently, not wanting to startle her. "Just hold on." He expected no response and received none, but as he reached up to cut the rope, he heard a voice barely more than a whisper. "Don't," she said, and the word came out strained and tight with pain. "Don't take it off." Samuel paused, and his knife hovered near the rope. "Ma'am, I can't leave you like this." "The sign," she managed, and each word seemed to cost her. "Don't take it off." He looked up at the wooden placard hanging above her, and his confusion must have shown on his face even though she couldn't see it from her position. Why would she care about that hateful thing? But there was something in her voice beyond the physical pain, and it gave him pause. Samuel lowered his knife and stood back, trying to think. The woman had been here for some time, he could tell. The blood had dried in dark stains on what remained of her dress, and the ropes had cut deep grooves into her ankles. She needed help immediately, but she'd asked him not to remove the sign, and something about the desperation in those few words made him reconsider his approach. "All right," he said finally. "I won't touch the sign yet, but I am getting you down and we can discuss the rest after." This time she didn't protest, and Samuel worked quickly. He climbed the tree with the agility of a man who'd spent his youth working ranches, and cut the rope with 2 swift motions. He'd positioned himself to catch her as she fell, and despite her slight frame, the dead weight nearly took him to the ground. He steadied himself and lowered her gently to the grass beneath the cottonwood. The woman's face was bruised and swollen, and her eyes struggled to focus after hanging inverted for what must have been hours. Samuel pulled his canteen from his saddle and helped her drink slowly. She coughed and sputtered at first, but then took several longer pulls at the water. "My name is Samuel Hart," he said quietly as he examined her injuries with practiced eyes. "This is my land, and you're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you here." She looked at him then, and really looked, and despite the pain etched across her features, he could see intelligence and something else he couldn't quite name. Fear perhaps, but not of him. Fear of something larger and more complicated. "Martha," she whispered. "Martha Running Deer." Samuel nodded and began cleaning the worst of her wounds with water from his canteen. The cuts weren't as deep as he'd feared, though they'd scar. What concerned him more was how long she'd been hanging there and what damage might have been done internally. "Who did this to you, Martha?" he asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. There were men in the territory who still carried the old hatreds, and they grew bolder when they thought no one was watching. She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she might not answer. Then she spoke, and her voice was stronger now, though still pained. "The Barton brothers," she said. "They came to my camp 3 days ago, and they were drunk and angry about something. They said the Apache had stolen their cattle. Though we've been peaceful and we don't have any cattle, they didn't care about truth, and they only wanted someone to punish. Samuel's jaw tightened. He knew the Bartons, and they were exactly the kind of men who gave this territory its bloody reputation. They'd come out west after the war looking for opportunity, but had found only their own bitterness, and they'd taken it out on anyone they deemed different or lesser. "There were others with you," he said, and it wasn't a question. Martha's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "My daughter," she whispered. "She ran when they came, and I told her to run and not look back. I don't know if she made it to the reservation or if they caught her too." The thought of a child fleeing through the desert alone made Samuel's heart ache. He had no children of his own, and his wife had passed 10 years prior from fever, but he remembered what it was to care for someone more than you cared for yourself. "How old is your daughter?" he asked. 14, Martha said. "Her name is Sarah, and she's strong, and she knows the land. But she's just a girl, and I'm so afraid." Samuel stood and looked back toward the sign still hanging from the cottonwood. He understood now why Martha had asked him not to remove it. The sign was a message meant for others to find, and if it disappeared, the Bartons might come looking. They might go to the reservation, and they might find Sarah if they suspected someone had interfered with their cruelty. "I need to get you to the house," Samuel said. "Can you ride if I help you?" Martha nodded, though the movement clearly caused her pain. Samuel lifted her carefully and settled her in front of him on his mare. The ride to the ranch house took 20 minutes, and he kept the pace gentle, knowing every jostle must be agony for her. The house was small but well kept, and Samuel had always maintained it carefully even in his solitude. He helped Martha inside and settled her on the bed in the spare room. She protested weakly, saying she shouldn't be in a white man's bed, but Samuel waved away her concerns with a gruffness that hid his embarrassment. "You're a guest in my home," he said firmly, "and you'll rest in a proper bed while you heal." He heated water on the stove and brought it to her along with clean cloths and the medicine kit he kept for ranch injuries. Martha watched him work with that same wary assessment he'd seen earlier, and he wondered what she saw when she looked at him. Another white man with secret cruelties hiding behind kindness, or someone genuinely trying to help. "Why did you cut me down?" she asked finally. "You could have ridden past, and you could have pretended you never saw anything." Most would have. Samuel paused in his ministrations and considered the question. It deserved an honest answer. "I was a lawman once," he said slowly. "Long time ago, back before the territory got civilized, or what passes for civilized out here. I saw a lot of terrible things, and I did some terrible things too in the name of justice. After my wife died, I came out here to get away from all that blood and anger. I wanted peace, and I wanted to live quiet." He met her eyes then and held her gaze. "But peace doesn't mean turning blind when someone needs help," he continued. "And it doesn't mean letting cruelty go unanswered just because it's convenient. I cut you down because it was the right thing to do and because I couldn't live with myself if I rode past." Martha was quiet for a long moment, and then she nodded slowly. "The sign," she said again. "You understand now why I asked you not to take it?" "I do," Samuel confirmed. "If it disappears, the Bartons will know someone interfered and they'll come looking. They might go after your daughter." "Yes," Martha whispered. "Sarah is all I have in this world, and if they find her because of me, I couldn't bear it." Samuel finished bandaging her wounds and then pulled a chair close to the bedside. "Then we'll leave the sign where it is for now," he said. "Let them think their message is being received, and let them think you're still hanging there if they don't come back to check. Meanwhile, I'm going to ride to the reservation tomorrow, and I'm going to find your daughter and bring her here." Martha's eyes widened. "You can't," she said urgently. "If they see you with her, or if anyone tells them a white rancher is helping an Apache woman and her daughter, then they'll come for all of us." "Maybe," Samuel acknowledged. "But your daughter doesn't know if you're alive or dead, and she's alone and scared. That's not something I can abide." He stood and moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at Martha. "Besides," he added with a small smile, "I'm an old man and I'm tired of being afraid of what angry fools might do. Sometimes you have to take a stand even when I